Picking up once again in the First Global Revolution, we are still in Chapter 8, and this is Part 5. The market system has flaws, certainly. Nevertheless, competition and incentive are undoubtedly effective in the current allocation of resources, in developing new technologies, and in the generation of the material prosperity which the industrialized countries enjoy today. Even those governments most devoted to the concepts of private enterprise recognize the need to define the boundaries within which the market can function. In the general public interest, governments have to provide a firm framework of regulations for the private sector and to establish mechanisms for the correction of abuses effectively. At the same time, governmental policies are necessary for the establishment of an economic climate propitious for the efficient functioning of the market within the country and to ensure that its products are competitive on the international market. Government strategies should also provide incentives for longer-term development, for example, by fiscal and other incentives to encourage industry to invest in scientific research and technological development towards longer-term sustainability. Japan has been particularly successful in developing a system combining business initiative and government incentive. Close collaboration between the public and the private sectors has been established as a basis for long-term technological development, particularly through publicly financed research programs with wide participation of private enterprise. It is particularly important at the moment that those countries which are now moving vigorously from centrally planned to market-oriented economies should recognize the limitations as well as the benefits of the market. Humanity in politics. There is need to introduce a new strain of humanity into politics. Recent years have seen a marked loss of confidence in political parties and personalities, contempt for bureaucracy, voter abstention, and a general alienation from the establishment and society. This may be due partly to over-centralization, which depersonalizes the system, and to bureaucratic oppression. It is a symptom of deep malaise. Leaders and bureaucrats seem to have forgotten that politics, like economics, is about people and serves people. Until humanity and compassion permeate politics and go beyond baby kissing during election campaigns, alienation will persist. The international dimension. We have already touched upon several difficulties of international governance, where many of the problems of the national level are compounded. The trend towards globality and recognition that many of the contemporary problems are essentially global and cannot be solved through individual country initiatives gives a greater enhanced importance to the United Nations and other international systems. Furthermore, recent events suggest that the nations may at last be willing to give the United Nations a considerably bigger role in the peacekeeping process and in environmental survival. The United Nations system, as initially conceived, and with the multitude of agencies and programs which were subsequently added in haphazard growth, is no longer what the world and global revolution requires. And the need for reform has long been recognized, but it has not been possible to achieve owing to the long geopolitical stalemate. This has now changed. The Soviet Union is taking an active approach in UN matters, and United States reticence appears to be diminishing. The time seems right, therefore, for a complete overhaul of the system, using, in addition to new analyses, the innumerable studies of UN reform needs which have been made during the last decade. We strongly urge, therefore, that an immediate start be made to redesign the system, and that the process not be left entirely to representatives of the various ministries of foreign affairs. Experts from industry and academia have many important contributions to make. Part of the review would aim at the re-examination of the mandates and activities of the multitude of agencies and programs, with a view to harmonize with a view to harmonizing their mandates, sharpening their focus, and ensuring a relatively balanced coverage of the vast range of interests. At present, there is the appearance of a good deal of duplication among these bodies. Much of this is desirable in terms of the problematique. A subject such as technology finds itself in UNESCO as arising from the science element of the UNESCO mandate. It is also centered in UNIDO in the industrial development context, while UNEP has to examine its consequences. Again, concern for technology is inevitable in ILO, FAO, UNDP, and the World Bank. In many areas, there is nevertheless great need for coordination between agencies. There exist, of course, the obvious interagency committees, but institutional rivalries produce the same kind of ineffectiveness that we have described in the case of interdepartmental committees on the national level. The importance and nature of many of the global problems suggests that new and flexible ways must be sought to tackle such issues, which, in their complexity, fit uneasily within the programs of particular agencies or institutions. In a more coherent UN system, it should be possible to designate certain problem areas as necessitating a combined approach from several of the specialized bodies. Programs would then be set up in which the participating agencies would take part in terms of both finance and enterprise, with some support from the center where appropriate. Such a scheme would entail more influence of the UN center in the work of the specialist bodies, but this might not be a bad thing if it could be done with minimum bureaucratic interference and if the programs were genuinely autonomous. New approaches are also needed in the normal working of some of the individual agencies. Intergovernmental organizations, just as governmental agencies on the national scale, are not propitious locations for the conduct of research. They can formulate problems, and provide for useful international discussions, but lack of sufficient funds prevents them from undertaking research in depth. Their work is essentially catalytic. The vast number of topics which an organization such as UNESCO has to examine makes it impossible to have a competent staff expert in all the detailed subjects covered. Furthermore, areas of particular concern necessarily change so that many matters of focus are only temporary on the agenda, with the new points of attack requiring a quite different set of skills. This problem is dealt with in most agencies by the use of consultants, but it would seem more efficient to adopt policies of delegating responsibility for particular studies in the most competent institutes in the world for each subject undertaken. Selection of competent individuals should be essentially on the basis of quality, and there should be no question of applying the principle of the juste retour. With such a system, the headquarters staff of high-quality individuals with a wide breadth of interests and contacts should be kept quite small. We'll pick up next video.